We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
And aborted baby parts into lab animals. Have you heard of that sort of research?
Yeah, we did an analysis a few years ago showing that over 90% of experiments with using human fetal tissue and putting them involved animals were funded by Fauci's NIAID.
Do you know where they're getting the aborted human fetal tissue?
Universities?
A lot of it is happening at colleges and universities that have affiliated hospitals that perform that
pro-abortion, kill your babies,
Chair,
because guess what? We need to use them for experiments on animals.
And University of Pittsburgh, they were doing a study where they were taking the scalps of 5-month-old aborted babies and they were grafting them onto lab rats and lab mice to see how much longer they could keep them growing for. And you can actually see the photographs in the published study of little baby scalps grafted onto the backs of lab rats, growing little baby hairs. Those would have been the little hairs growing on the heads of little infants in Pittsburgh if they hadn't been killed by abortion and then stitched onto lab rats for experimentation. This study was funded by a grant, by multiple grants from the NIAID office, which is run by Dr. Anthony Fauci. And when I was undercover, Planned Parenthood abortion providers told me that they were the ones who were supplying the aborted baby body parts for experiments at the University of Pittsburgh.
Have a hard time reconstructing the human ear because of its delicate nature. A team of Harvard and MIT scientists decided to help them with it in a very interesting way in 1997. Rodents and humans don't usually go well together, but these scientists found a way to use the mouse to develop a human ear that can later be transplanted onto a human. They put a human ear-shaped biodegradable scaffolding inside of a mouse. As time passes, the material will be absorbed into the mouse's body and it will make an actual human ear. But they had to pull the plugs on the experiment because of funding issues. Maybe someday we will have human ears made by our little mouse friends.
Organs, bones, and other body parts of aborted babies are being sold and transplanted into lab animals. No, this is not a passage out of Frankenstein. These are real experiments happening now that taxpayers are funding.
It's abhorrent on so many levels.
Anthony Bellotti is president and founder of White Coat Waste Project, a group exposing experiments like this. Here, the reproductive tracts from aborted 13-week-old twin girls were stripped out and implanted into mice. Last year, the National Institutes of Health funded 200 similar studies across 50 institutions, mostly universities, in 33 states. This year, the NIH estimates it will spend $120 million tax dollars on research using aborted baby parts.
But this is a crisis now. This problem is growing in spite of Republicans, Democrats, pro-lifers, animal advocates. Nobody wants this.
Teresa Bukovac runs Pro-Life San Francisco. The bulk of the research happens in her backyard.
The White Coat Waste Project identified at least $10 million in NIH grants for transgender animal experiments. You state that 95% of the funding came from Dr. Fauci's NIAID. Why is the federal government spending taxpayer dollars to create transgender animals?
It's a great question.
Your microphone.
Thank you. It's a great question. I mean, I wonder why they're making cats constipated also. It's a question that rings around in my head at night when I'm going to bed, why we're funding these things. A lot of the programs that are funded do latch on to some type of social trend, and then animal experimenters use it as a money grab, as an excuse to get NIH tax funds from some, in this case, DEI grants were used to fund a lot of this stuff. So people who abuse animals find some kind of excuse to bring in new money, and they'll switch their research program over to something that's trendy to bring tax dollars into their university. I mean, that's part of the big problem here, is that colleges and universities are taking 25 to 40% off the top of every single one of these grants for indirect costs that go into a slush fund that has nothing to do with the research. So they're willing to let experimenters do whatever they want to animals to keep the money flowing in.
Some people might describe that as money laundering.
No oversight. We've got to stop. If you can meet your objectives without using animals, there's absolutely no reason that you should. And so
And I was going to say, thank you for bringing that up, the amount of money, the hundreds of millions. I recently found out in the state of South Carolina, in my district, there's a primate breeding center and testing site, Alpha Genesis. They've made, to my understanding, over $100 million from NIH over the last 20 or so years. This is a boondoggle. It is a racket. And hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars, in fact, have been wasted on it. So,
since 1998, how much do you believe that the federal government has spent on animal cruelty testing?
Thank you for the question. That's, as we've been discussing, it's tough because there's not a lot of transparency about actually how much tax dollars are being spent. I would say we're probably looking at $1 trillion in spending by NIH since '98, and if about 47% of that is used for experiments on animals, $500 billion could have potentially been spent on animal testing since 1998.
That is an extreme number. Many of these treatments have found cures in humans that come from this cruel kind of testing.
Virtually none. We've heard the statistics today, and any that have come, it's out of pure dumb luck. And they're the exception, not the rule, because animal experiments are a dead end. It's pure chance if something good comes out of it.
And so I'm seeing here with NIAID, the budget of spending $6.5 billion in taxpayer money. It's been used to pay EcoHealth Alliance to import hundreds of Asian bats into the U.S. for new viruses in labs in Colorado run by the Wuhan-linked researchers. That's $6.7 billion for the Colorado State University in Fort Collins to research bats here in America. And we've also sent billions of taxpayer dollars to unaccountable labs in China and other foreign countries implant aborted baby parts into lab animals. Have you heard of that sort of research?
Yeah, we did an analysis a few years ago showing that over 90% of experiments with using human fetal tissue and putting them involved animals were funded by Fauci's NIAID.
Do you know where they're getting the aborted human fetal tissue?
A lot of it is happening at colleges and universities that have affiliated hospitals that perform that procedure.
what is the worst animal testing experiment you've ever heard of and uncovered? There's some really bad ones out there. What is the absolute worst one you've ever heard of and uncovered?
The kitten cannibalism was pretty horrendous. Breeding kittens just to force them to eat cat meat and then killing them even though they were perfectly healthy after they collected their feces out of a litter box. I mean, that's literally what was happening. They were doing that to thousands and thousands of kittens. The DOJ, until recently, was stabbing, shooting, and blowing up live animals for training exercises. We were able to cut that and defund that. The experiments that the NIH funded and Fauci funded in Tunisia, where they were putting the dogs in heads in mesh cages and filling them with biting flies. There's a lot of nightmare stuff that we're being forced to fund, and taxpayers don't like it, and they don't even know how bad the situation is. If they did, they would be, marching in the streets.
Fauci's U.S.-funded research at China's Wuhan lab. What are the public health risks if we continue some of these outrageous animal studies?
We're flirting with disaster if we continue to fund dangerous virus research, both abroad, like in Colorado, where Fauci greenlit this bat lab. They're trying to import hundreds of bats from Asia to build a new lab in Colorado to do virus experiments with Ebola, Nipah, Lassa, deadly viruses for which there's no cure. It's just a matter of time before we have another pandemic on our hands if we let mad scientists run amok with our money.
This is it. Human stem cells being injected into a pig's embryo. For the first time, scientists are seeing how our cells grow and interact inside an animal. This pig, the first known chimera.
The ultimate goal for this type of research is to whether we can use this technology to generate human tissue and organs. That's going to give us a lot of unique insights.
Right now, scientists are nowhere near that goal, but recent studies have shown how that process can work using gene editing. Scientists would delete a specific piece of an animal's DNA, so its embryo wouldn't be able to grow a heart, for example. Then they'd inject that embryo with human stem cells, which move into the void and grow a human heart. The embryo would then be put back inside the animal to develop.
The possibility of growing human cells and tissues inside animals is an exciting first step for the dream of generating tissues and organs for transplantation into humans. We're still far away.
To date, everything.
Scientists have created the first human-animal hybrids in a major breakthrough which could address a critical shortage of donor organs. A team of international researchers have grown human cells inside pig embryos, which could eventually form the early stages of human organs. However, ethical questions continue to cause controversy.
First human-animal embryo experiment approved in Japan. Japan has become the first country to greenlight a controversial experiment involving hybrid human-animal embryos. According to Nature magazine, experts at Japan's Science Ministry have approved a University of Tokyo proposal to grow human stem cells in mouse, rat, and pig embryos and transplant them into surrogate animals. Lead researcher Hiromitsu Nakauchi says the goal is to create animals with human organs that can then be used for transplants. The proposal is the first one approved since Japan lifted a ban in March on developing animal embryos with human cells beyond 14 days and bringing them to term. Nakauchi told Nature they will be creating animal embryos that lack a gene to produce certain organs. Once injected with human-induced pluripotent stem cells, or iPS cells, the embryo will use the iPS cells to make the organ. He says he plans to grow mouse embryos for 14.5 days until they are almost to term. Rats will
man who received a groundbreaking heart transplant 2 months ago has died. David Bennett's failing heart had been replaced by the heart of a genetically altered pig. It's not yet clear why he died, but the procedure offers hope to thousands of people waiting for transplants during a shortage of organs.
Of Maryland surgeon successfully transplant a pig heart into a man.
He becomes just the second patient to ever undergo this experimental procedure. Lawrence Fawcett is a 58-year-old Navy veteran who lives in Frederick. He had end-stage heart disease, but was deemed ineligible for a traditional heart transplant with a human heart because of pre-existing conditions. The experimental transplant was his only other option. The procedure appears to be successful, and Fawcett is hoping for the best.
Major medical breakthrough. An Alabama woman is providing new hope for people who desperately need an organ transplant because her new kidney came from a pig. Morgan Norwood has that story for us. Good morning, Morgan.
Good morning to you, Robin. This is just a fascinating story. Tawana Looney went into organ failure just years after donating her kidney to her mother. She would then spend years tethered to the dialysis chair, and now this groundbreaking operation has changed everything for her. We sat down with Tawana exclusively as she shares her hope for others.
I could feel the blood flow through my veins. That's how strong the kidney was pumping.
Tawana Looney is only the 5th person in the world to receive a genetically modified organ from a pig. She's part of a growing group of trailblazers undergoing groundbreaking procedures, which doctors say could help change the world.
It is, I think, a very important component of a multifaceted approach to trying to relieve the organ shortage.
Recipients right now are approved on a case-by-case basis.
If you were to put an unmodified farm pig organ, whether it's a kidney or a heart, into us, we would reject it in a matter of minutes. So we're actually adding a gene that inhibits the immune system right to the organ.
The first 4 recipients all passed away within 3 months of their transplants, but Looney is so far the healthiest person to receive a pig organ.
David, how's this group of cattle been modified?
We've added a different human gene to these animals. This is a human milk protein gene to make a better infant formula that's more nutritious as well as less allergenic for those people that have milk allergies.
Rather than creating disease, Dr. Reyes says he's helping the world fight it. He's developing new drugs and vaccines in the milk and blood of these animals that he believes will help defeat everything from simple allergies to deadly plagues unleashed in biological warfare.
So you inject the pig with an anthrax or Ebola and then create this antibody, this vaccine.
Right, that then can be used as a vaccine for preventing this disease in thousands of soldiers out on the field that are exposed to biowarfare agents, or a whole population of a city with 1 million people that get exposed to it as an aerosol from a terrorist.
What about the possibility, though, of an infected pig escaping and getting into the food chain?
Well, it's very unlikely that they're going to escape because they're in an enclosed building, and then by law we have to double fence them.
So you guarantee our safety?
Sure.
No question.
No question.